I had just turned 18 when my stepmother threw my suitcase onto the porch and called me trash. I did not cry. I simply disappeared. 15 years later. She called begging for $50,000 for life-saving surgery. In response, I sent her a map to the homeless shelter where I slept after she evicted me. That was just the beginning of the secret that would destroy the Kensington family. My name is Brielle Kensington, and the sound of a deadbolt sliding into place is a specific frequency of heavy that you never forget. It was not just a door closing, it was a period at the end of a sentence I had been writing for 10 years. The heavy oak door of the Kensington residence did not just shut, it sealed. It was the sound of a submarine hatch locking, separating the pressurized, perfect air inside from the crushing, dark water where I was now standing. I stood on the front porch, staring at the wood grain. I knew every knot in that wood. I had polished it every Saturday morning since I was 8 years old. Now, it was just a barrier. The cold January wind bit through my thin hoodie, but the chill I felt had nothing to do with the weather. It was the absolute 0-degree realization that the woman inside had finally won. To understand why I was standing on a welcome mat that cost more than my entire wardrobe, you have to understand Cynthia Kensington. My stepmother was a masterpiece of suburban camouflage. To the outside world, to the PTA moms and the charity gala organizers, Cynthia was impeccable. She smelled of expensive lavender soap and moral superiority. She was the kind of woman who ironed her jeans and considered a scuff on the hardwood floor to be a personal insult. She had a smile that could light up a room. But if you looked closely, it never quite reached her eyes. Her eyes were always assessing, calculating the value of everything and everyone in her orbit. I was the only thing in her ledger that constantly came up in the red. Then there was my father, Grant Kensington. If Cynthia was the hurricane, Grant was the man who simply closed the blinds and pretended it was sunny outside. He was a man who valued peace over justice, silence over truth. His favorite phrases were etched into my brain like scars. Let me talk to her later. Do not make a scene. Just apologize. Brielle. It is easier that way. He was not a villain in the traditional sense. He did not beat me or starve me. He just let me slowly disappear. He watched his wife chip away at my existence piece by piece, and he turned up the volume on the television so he would not have to hear the cracking sounds. The house had a golden child. Of course, that was Logan. Logan was Cynthia's biological son, my stepbrother, and the sun around which the Kensington solar system revolved. Logan was 2 years older than me. When he turned 16, he got a brand new sedan with a red bow on the hood. When I turned 16, I got a list of extra chores because I was old enough to contribute more to the household. Logan had the loft bedroom with the skylight and the private bath. I had the room next to the HVAC unit that rattled like a dying tractor every time the heat kicked on. It was not just the material things, it was the erasure. I was the ghost in the machine. When the annual family Christmas cards went out, they featured Grant, Cynthia, and Logan, coordinated in matching cashmere sweaters, smiling in front of a fireplace. I was never in the frame. One year, when a neighbor asked where I was, Cynthia laughed that tinkling, glass-like laugh of hers and said I was camera shy. I was actually upstairs, scrubbing the grout in the guest bathroom because she said it looked dingy. I was the spare, the error, the reminder of a life my father had before he upgraded to Cynthia. The final act began on New Year's Eve. The night before my 18th birthday, the house was full of guests, the air thick with the smell of roast beef and expensive wine. Cynthia had cornered me in the kitchen. She was wearing a silver dress that shimmered like fish scales. "Come here, Brielle," she had said, her voice sugary sweet, because her friends were watching. "Let us get a family picture." I was frozen. Usually, I was told to stay out of sight. I walked over, feeling awkward in my worn-out jeans and a sweater that had belonged to Logan 3 years ago. I stood at the edge of the group. My father put a hesitant hand on my shoulder, but Cynthia shifted. She angled her body, blocking half of mine. Logan grinned his winning grin, the one that got him out of speeding tickets and into a top-tier university. "Smile, everyone," Cynthia chirped. The camera flashed. Later that night, I was lying in bed, scrolling through social media on my cracked phone, and I saw the post. Cynthia had uploaded the photo with the caption, "My whole world in one frame. Blessed." She had cropped the photo. I was gone. All that remained of me was a blurry elbow on the far left. The comments underneath were full of praise for the beautiful family. No one asked about the missing elbow. It was a digital prophecy. She was showing me exactly what she intended to do with my reality. I did not sleep that night. I listened to the wind howl and watched the clock tick toward midnight. 12 o'clock, January 1st. Happy birthday to me. I was 18, an adult. The next morning, the house was quiet. The party debris had been cleared away because Cynthia did not believe in messes lingering past dawn. I walked into the kitchen, hoping, stupidly, for a pancake, or a greeting, or maybe just an acknowledgement that I had survived another year. Instead, I found a stack of papers sitting on the pristine marble island. Cynthia was sitting there, sipping her herbal tea. She did not look up when I entered. She just tapped a manicured fingernail on the stack. "Good morning. Brielle," she said. "Happy birthday." I looked at the papers. The header read, "Rental Agreement and Household Conduct Contract." "What is this?" I asked, my voice thick with sleep. "You are 18 today," she said, finally looking at me. Her face was perfectly made up, not a hair out of place. "In this state, and in this house, that means you are an adult. We do not run a charity here. Brielle, if you want to continue living under this roof, the dynamic changes." I picked up the document. The terms were insane. It demanded $800 a month in rent, payable on the 1st. It listed a schedule of chores that would take 6 hours a day to complete. It had a curfew of 9 in the evening. It forbade overnight guests, loud music, and the consumption of food in the bedrooms. But the worst part was the last page. It was a separate document titled Voluntary Departure and Waiver of Residency. Essentially, it was a legal document stating that I was leaving of my own free will and that I surrendered any claim to residency at the Kensington address. "Sign the lease or sign the waiver," Cynthia said, taking a delicate sip of her tea. "Those are your options." I looked at my father. He was standing by the coffee maker, staring intently at the brewing process as if it were the most fascinating thing in the universe. "Dad," I said. He flinched. He did not turn around. "Your mother?" he started, then corrected himself. "Cynthia feels that it is time for you to learn some responsibility." "Responsibility," I laughed. A harsh, dry sound. "I have been doing my own laundry since I was 7. I cook dinner 4 nights a week. I mow the lawn. I have a part-time job at the diner just to buy my own school supplies. Then $800 should be no problem for you," Cynthia interjected smoothly. "I make $9 an hour. Cynthia, I am still in high school. I have 5 months until graduation." "That sounds like a personal management problem," she said. I looked at Logan. He was leaning against the refrigerator, eating an apple. He looked bored. This was just morning entertainment for him. He knew he would never see a contract like this. His college tuition was already paid for. His rent would be covered by the bank of Dad. "I am not signing this," I said, dropping the papers back onto the island. "I cannot pay this. You know I cannot pay this." Cynthia smiled. It was a terrifying expression. It was the smile of a hunter who had just heard the trap snap shut. "I thought you might say that," she said. She stood up and walked to the mudroom adjacent to the kitchen. She opened the door and dragged something out. It was my suitcase, the old battered Samsonite I had found at a garage sale. It was bulging. She had already packed my things, while I was sleeping. While I was staring at the ceiling wishing for a better life, she had been in my room, shoving my clothes into a bag. The violation of it made my stomach lurch. "You have got to be kidding me," I whispered. "Grant, please," I said, looking at my father's back. "Do not let her do this. It is winter. I have nowhere to go." My father's shoulders slumped. He looked like a man made of gray clay. "Brielle, honey, maybe it is best if you take some time," he mumbled. We need peace in this house." Peace. There was that word again. His peace was my homelessness. Cynthia did not wait for further debate. She rolled the suitcase to the front door. I followed her, my legs feeling like they were moving through wet cement. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought they might crack. She opened the heavy front door. The cold air rushed in. "You chose this. Brielle," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "You refused the contract. You are an adult. You are trespassing." She shoved the suitcase. It tumbled across the threshold, skidding across the porch and landing on the concrete walkway with a sickening thud. The zipper strained, and a sleeve of my favorite flannel shirt poked out like a tongue. I looked at her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear that calm mask off her face. I wanted to shake my father until his teeth rattled. But a strange calm washed over me. It was the numbness of total devastation. There was no point in fighting. You cannot fight a glacier. You just get crushed. I stepped out onto the porch. I did not take a coat. My hoodie was all I had. Cynthia stood in the doorway, framed by the warmth of the house I had cleaned but never owned. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my worn sneakers. "You know," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper so only I could hear. "I always knew you would end up like this. You were never going to be one of us." She leaned in closer, her lavender scent overpowering the crisp winter air. "You are trash," she said. "Get out." She slammed the door. Then came the lock. Click. I stood there for a long time. My breath formed white clouds in the air. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline crash. I walked down the steps and picked up my suitcase. It was heavy. It contained my entire life. I dragged it toward the sidewalk. I did not know where I was going. I had $40 in my pocket and a half-charged phone. I stopped at the edge of the driveway and turned back to look at the house one last time. It looked perfect. The brick was pristine. The windows were gleaming. The landscaping was manicured to within an inch of its life. It was a monument to the lie that lived inside. Then I saw it. To the left, in the neighboring yard, Mrs. Marlene was standing by her rose bushes. She was wearing her thick gardening coat, holding a pair of shears in one hand. But in her other hand, she held her phone. She was holding it up. The lens pointed directly at the Kensington porch. She was not looking at her roses. She was looking at me. She was looking at the door. Her face was pale, her mouth slightly open in shock. She lowered the phone slowly, and our eyes met across the frozen lawn. She had seen everything. And by the way she was gripping that device, I realized something else. She had recorded it. The wheels of my Samsonite suitcase rumbled against the pavement like thunder in a library. In the silence of the suburb, the sound was aggressive, a mechanical announcement that I was leaving. I did not look back at the house. I could feel the heat of the structure behind me, radiating the warmth I was no longer entitled to. But I kept my eyes on the cracks in the sidewalk. My phone screen was dim, conserving the last 3% of its battery life. The cold air was already seeping through the thin cotton of my hoodie, finding the spaces between my ribs and settling there. Mrs. Marlene did not say a word at first. She walked down her driveway, her gardening boots crunching on the frost-tipped grass. She did not hug me. We were not that kind of neighbors. I think she knew that a hug would have shattered me right there on the concrete. Instead, she reached into the deep pocket of her canvas coat and pulled out a bottle of water and a folded piece of paper. She pressed them into my free hand. Her fingers were warm and rough like sandpaper. "There is a women's shelter in Oak Creek," she said, her voice low and hurried, as if she were passing state secrets. "It is called the Barely Audible. It is not great, Brielle, but it is safe. The bus stops 2 blocks over. It comes in 20 minutes. I looked at the paper. It had an address scrawled in shaky blue ink. "Thank you, Mrs. Marlene," I whispered. My throat felt like it was full of broken glass. She looked at the Kensington house, her eyes narrowing. Then she looked back at me. I saw what she did. She said firmly, "You just keep walking, honey. Do not stop until you get there." I nodded and turned away. The walk to the bus stop was the longest mile of my life. Every car that passed made me flinch. thinking it might be Cynthia coming to finish the job. Or maybe my father coming to save me. Neither happened. I sat on the metal bench, the cold steel biting through my jeans. I pulled out my phone, 2% battery. I had to try. One last time. I dialed my father's number. It rang, and rang, and rang. I pictured him standing in the kitchen, the phone vibrating on the counter while Cynthia lectured him about boundaries and tough love. Maybe he was looking at it. Maybe he was reaching for it. The call went to voicemail. "Please, Dad," I said to the recording, my voice cracking. "It is freezing. I have nowhere to go. Please call me." I stared at the screen, willing it to light up. 1 minute passed, then 5. The bus rounded the corner, its brakes screeching like a dying animal. As I stood up to board, the phone buzzed. A text message from Dad. I opened it, my fingers trembling so hard I almost dropped the device. "I am busy. We will talk later." That was it. 5 words. 5 words to dismantle 18 years of fatherhood. He was not coming. He was not fighting for me. He was busy. I paid the fare with a crumpled $5 bill and sat in the back of the bus. I did not cry. The tears were there, sitting heavy behind my eyes. But I refused to let them fall. Crying was a luxury for people who had beds to sleep in. I was in survival mode now. The shelter was a squat brick building sandwiched between a liquor store and a pawn shop. It smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. The intake process was humiliating in its efficiency. A woman named Brenda sat behind a plexiglass barrier, typing my answers into a computer that looked older than I was. Name Brielle Kensington. Age 18. Today. Reason for homelessness. I paused. Eviction abandonment. Cruelty. Family dispute. I said softly. Brenda did not look up. She just kept typing. She took my phone to charge it behind the desk, took my details, and handed me a thin, scratchy towel and a pillowcase. "Bed 14, she said. "Lights out at 10. No drugs, no alcohol, no fighting. You miss curfew. You lose your bed." The room was a cavernous hall filled with metal bunk beds. It was filled with the sounds of 40 other women existing in close quarters. There was coughing, the rustle of plastic bags, and the rhythmic sawing of snores. I found bed 14. It was a top bunk. The mattress was covered in plastic that crinkled when I sat on it. That first night, I did not sleep. I lay there, staring at the water-stained ceiling tiles, listening to a woman 2 bunks over weeping softly into her pillow. I realized then that I was no longer Brielle Kensington, the girl who polished the banister. I was a number. I was a statistic. But for the first time in years, I did not feel invisible. Here, misery was the common language. No one looked at me like I was a stain on the carpet. We were all just trying to survive the night. The next morning, the reality of my new life set in. I had $40 and a high school education that was 5 months shy of a diploma. I needed money. I needed a roof that did not require me to leave at 7 in the morning. I hit the pavement. By noon, I had secured a morning shift at a diner called Sal's. It was a greasy spoon where the waitresses were expected to have thick skin and fast hands. By 4 in the afternoon, I had talked my way into an evening job at a distribution warehouse, sweeping floors and breaking down boxes. My life became a blur of exhaustion. I would wake up at the shelter at 6, walk to the diner, work until 2, walk to the warehouse, work until 10, and sprint back to the shelter to make curfew. I ate leftovers from the diner plates when the manager was not looking. I saved every single penny. My goal was simple: a room, just a room with a door that is locked, and then trade school. I needed a skill that no one could take away from me. 3 weeks into this new existence, I went to the public library to check my email. I was hoping for a response from a room for rent ad I had answered. Instead, I saw a subject line that made my stomach drop. From Cynthia Kensington, subject growing up. I opened it, my hand gripping the mouse so hard my knuckles turned white. Brielle, I hope you are finding your way. I want you to know that I did what I did for your own good. You needed a push to become independent. You were becoming too comfortable relying on us. I have attached a photo of your things on the porch. so you cannot say we kept anything of yours. It is proof that you left voluntarily and took your belongings. Do not try to spin a narrative that you were victimized. This is adulthood. Welcome to it. Cynthia. Attached was a photo of my suitcase sitting on the porch, taken from the doorway. It was framed perfectly to look like I had packed it and left it there while waiting for a ride. She was covering her tracks. She was building a defense for a court case that hadn't even happened yet. The calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. She did not just want me gone. She wanted to make sure I could never come back and claim I was wronged. I deleted the email. I could not let her into my head, but she was already in my life in ways I did not understand yet. A few days later, I checked my student checking account balance at an ATM. I was expecting to see the $200 I had managed to scrape together from tips. Instead, the balance was $195. There was a $5 service fee. That was strange. My account was a student account. It was supposed to be fee-free. I used my lunch break to call the bank. I huddled in the alley behind the diner, pressing the phone to my ear to hear over the noise of the kitchen exhaust fans. "I am sorry, Miss Kensington," the customer service representative said, "but we sent the notification of the fee change to your address on file. Since we did not receive a response, the new account tier was applied." "My address," I asked. "I changed my address to a POTO box 3 weeks ago. I see here that the address was updated back to the Kensington residence 4 days ago," the representative said. "The request was made online." My blood ran cold. "Updated back?" I asked. "Who updated it?" "It was done through the online portal, with the correct security questions," she replied. I hung up. I went straight to the post office after my shift. I stood in line for 20 minutes, my work boots heavy on my feet, dust from the warehouse coating my skin. When I finally got to the counter, I asked to see the change of address history for my name. The clerk, a tired-looking man with bifocals, tapped on his keyboard. "I cannot give you the details of who made the change if it was done with valid authorization," he said, "but I can tell you that a permanent forward was filed to move your mail from the POI box back to the residential address on Highland Avenue. But I'm standing right here," I said, my voice rising. "I did not do that. The system shows it was verified with a driver's license number and social security match," he said, looking at me with suspicion. "If you want to dispute it, you have to file a fraud claim. It takes 30 to 60 days to investigate." I walked out of the post office into the gray afternoon light. I felt sick. It wasn't just that she had kicked me out. Cynthia was actively reeling me back in, not physically, but on paper. She was intercepting my mail. She was monitoring my bank. She had my social security number. She had my birth certificate. She had everything. Why? Why would she want my mail if she wanted me gone? The answer came 2 days later. I arrived at the shelter just before curfew. Brenda handed me a white envelope. "This came for you," she said. "It has the shelter address on it." "But your name?" I frowned. I had not given the shelter address to anyone except my employer. I tore open the envelope. It was not a personal letter. It was a bill. The logo at the top was for St. Jude's Regional Medical Center, a hospital in a city 3 hours away, a place I had never visited in my life. I scanned the document. Patient Brielle Kensington. Date of service January 15th. Service emergency room. Diagnostic imaging. Amount due $2,400. I stared at the date, January 15th. That was 3 days ago. I had been working a double shift that day. I had witnesses. I had time cards. I had never been near that hospital. My hands began to shake. This was not a mistake. This was not a clerical error. Someone had walked into an emergency room, used my name, used my social security number, and racked up a bill they had no intention of paying. And because Cynthia had redirected my mail, I was never supposed to see this. The only reason it came here was that the hospital likely used a credit check system that picked up my most recent active address, which I had used for my job application. Cynthia was not just erasing me, she was becoming me. She was using my clean, empty credit history as a fresh slate for debt. I looked at the bill, then at the map on the wall of the shelter. I was 18 years old, homeless, and apparently, I was already thousands of dollars in debt. I sat on my bunk and listened to the woman 2 beds over crying again. But this time, I did not just listen. I pulled out a notebook and a pen. I wrote down the date. I wrote down the amount. I wrote down the name of the hospital. If Cynthia wanted a war, she was going to get one, but I was not going to fight with screaming matches on the lawn. I was going to fight with paper. The glow of the library computer monitor was the only light I trusted anymore. It was harsh, blue, and unapologetically honest. I sat there, surrounded by the smell of old paper and dust, staring at a document that confirmed my suspicions were not just paranoia. They were mathematical facts. I had requested my annual free credit report. It was supposed to be a blank slate, a fresh start for an 18-year-old girl with 0 assets and 0 liabilities. Instead, it looked like the financial history of a reckless spender who had been living beyond her means for months. There were 3 new inquiries. First, a credit card from a high-end home improvement store, opened on January 5th with a limit of $5,000. It was nearly maxed out. Second, a General Rewards Visa card, opened on January 10th, balance $3,000. Third, a short-term consumer loan from a predatory lending agency known for high interest rates, amount $7,000. I did not cry. The time for tears had passed in the shelter. This was different. This was data. I reached into my backpack and pulled out a fresh legal pad. I clicked my pen and began to write. I did not write a diary entry. I wrote a timeline. January 1st eviction. January 5th, credit card 1 opened. January 10th, credit card 2 opened. January 12th, loan application submitted. I listed the creditor names, the account numbers partially visible on the report, and the addresses associated with the inquiries. They all pointed back to one zip code, my old zip code. I realized then that I could not just survive this. I had to understand it. I was being buried under a mountain of paperwork, so I decided I needed to learn how to climb. I enrolled in the local community college the very next week. I did not sign up for literature or history. I declared my major in risk management with a minor in criminal justice. I wanted to know how the system worked. I wanted to know how people like Cynthia slipped through the cracks, and more importantly, how people like me could catch them. My days became a grueling test of endurance. I worked the breakfast shift at the diner from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. I smelled like bacon grease and stale coffee, but I did not care. I took that money and paid for my tuition in cash, installment by installment, from 3 in the afternoon until 9 at night. I attended classes or studied in the library. My favorite class was Introduction to Financial Fraud. The professor, a retired forensic accountant named Mr. Henderson, looked at numbers the way a conductor looks at a symphony. He taught us that numbers never lie, but people do. He taught us to look for the anomalies, the patterns that did not fit. I sat in the front row every single session. I asked questions about synthetic identity theft, about familial fraud, about the statute of limitations on debt assumption. I absorbed it all. I was not studying for a grade. I was studying for a war. 6 months later, I saw a flyer on the campus bulletin board. Graybridge Risk Solutions was looking for unpaid interns. They were a boutique firm that specialized in insurance fraud and complex financial disputes. Most students ignored the flyer because it was unpaid. I saw it as an opportunity to get my hands on the weapons I needed. I walked into their office wearing a blazer I had bought for $4 at a thrift store. I met Daphne Rowe. Daphne was terrifying. She was a woman in her 50s who wore sharp, tailored suits and glasses that looked like they could cut glass. She did not smile when I sat down. She looked at my resume, which consisted of waiting tables and sweeping warehouse floors. "Why are you here?" she asked. "You have no experience." "I have motivation," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I know what it feels like to be erased by a system that favors the person with the pen. I want to be the one holding the pen." Daphne stared at me for a long moment. She took off her glasses and cleaned them slowly. "We do not do justice here, Miss Kensington," she said. "We do compliance. We do audits. We do not get angry. Anger makes you sloppy. Anger makes you miss the decimal point. If you want to work for me, you leave your feelings at the door. Do not take revenge with emotions. Take revenge with a dossier. I got the job. I worked harder for Daphne than I had ever worked in my life. I learned how to trace shell companies. I learned how to cross-reference social media posts with insurance claims. I learned that people who commit fraud are almost always arrogant. They leave breadcrumbs because they do not believe anyone is smart enough to follow them. With my diner money and the stability of my schedule, I finally moved out of the shelter. I found a studio apartment above a laundromat on the edge of town. It was tiny. The floor slanted slightly to the left, and the radiator hissed like a pit viper all night long. The refrigerator contained nothing but a carton of almond milk and a jar of mustard. But I had a key. The first night I slept there, I locked the door, then I unlocked it and locked it again, just to hear the sound. Click. It was the inverse of the sound that had ended my childhood. This click meant I was safe. This click meant that no one could come in unless I allowed them. I sat on the floor, eating a sandwich, and felt a profound sense of ownership. This poverty was mine. This struggle was mine. I severed the final cords. I blocked Cynthia's number. I blocked the house line. I set up a filter on my email so that anything from my father went into a specific folder that I only checked once a month. I did not want their voices in my head. I did. However, keep a window open into their world. I created a dummy social media account, blank and anonymous, to watch them. Logan was thriving, or so it seemed. He posted photos of himself on the quad of his expensive private university. He was leaning against a brand new silver convertible. The caption read, "Freshman year." Let's go. I looked up the price of the car. $40,000. I wondered whose credit score had helped secure that interest rate. Cynthia was posting too. She posted photos of her garden, her charity luncheons, and throwbacks to family vacations where I had been left behind to watch the dogs. Her status updates were nauseatingly wholesome. "Family is everything," she wrote on a picture of her and Grant at a vineyard. "Through thick and thin, we stick together." I stared at the screen in my dark apartment. The hypocrisy was physical. It felt like bile in my throat. She was building a monument to her own sainthood while actively destroying my financial future. She thought she had won because I was silent. She thought I was just the trash she had thrown out, rotting away in a landfill somewhere. She did not know that trash could be recycled. She did not know that I was not rotting. I was fermenting. I was becoming something potent. One day, they would have to answer for it, not to me, but to the truth. I would make sure that when the house of cards fell, it would be because the foundation was made of lies they had signed their names to. A year passed, then two. I moved from intern to junior analyst at Graybridge. Daphne became less of a boss and more of a mentor. She taught me how to detach. When we caught a man faking a disability claim to pay off gambling debts, I felt a surge of righteous anger. Daphne made me rewrite the report 3 times until the anger was gone and only the cold. Hard evidence remained. "You are a scalpel." "Brielle," she told me. "Not a hammer. Hammers make a mess. Scalpels are precise." I lived by those words. One Tuesday afternoon in late October, the sky outside the office was the color of a bruise. The rain was lashing against the windows. I was deep in a spreadsheet, analyzing a series of suspicious wire transfers for a client in the logistics sector. My desk phone rang. It was Daphne. "Brielle, come to my office," she said. Her voice was different. Usually, she was brisk and efficient. Today, she sounded cautious. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I walked down the hallway to the corner office. Daphne was standing by the window, looking out at the rain. On her desk sat a thick manila folder. "Close the door," she said. I closed it and sat down. Daphne turned around. She did not sit. She leaned against the edge of her desk, crossing her arms. "We just received a new retainment from a regional bank," she said. "They are looking into a series of defaulted loans and potential mortgage fraud involving a few properties in the suburbs. They want us to do a forensic trace on the assets before they move to litigation." "Okay," I said, reaching for my notepad. "What is the scope?" Daphne placed her hand on the folder. I was reviewing the preliminary data. She said, The primary debtor is a limited liability company called CK Visions, but the guarantors are individuals. She slid the folder across the desk toward me. I opened it. The first page was a summary of the debt, a massive second mortgage, several refinanced auto loans, a defaulted business loan. My eyes scanned down to the list of guarantors. Primary guarantor Grant Kensington, secondary guarantor Cynthia Kensington. And then, below that, in a section marked Collateralized Assets and Associated Parties Trust Beneficiary, co-signer Disputed Brielle Kensington. The room seemed to tilt. My name. My name was on a file in my own office, not as an employee, but as a subject. Daphne was watching me closely. I did not know if I should show this to you, she said quietly. It is a conflict of interest. But then I looked at the dates. She tapped a specific line on the document. This loan originated 3 years ago, she said. But this co-signature, the one authorizing the use of a trust fund as collateral. It is dated 6 months ago. I looked up at her. I did not sign this. I said, I have not spoken to them in years. Daphne's eyes were hard, but not at me. I know, she said, because 6 months ago, you were sitting at the desk outside my door, auditing a shipping company. You were here until 9 at night. She took the folder back and closed it. This is not just a bad debt. Brielle, she said, this is a crime scene, and you are not just the victim anymore. You are the investigator. The silence I had cultivated was being filled by a noise I could not control. While I was busy learning how to audit financial crimes in a windowless office, Cynthia was busy auditioning for the role of the century in the court of public opinion. She was rewriting history, and she was doing it with the skill of a seasoned PR crisis manager. It started as a low hum in the background of my life, a vibration I felt before I heard it. Then, the whispers became audible sentences. I would walk into the grocery store, and the cashier, a woman who had known me since I was a child, would avert her eyes. I would see old high school acquaintances in the street, and they would cross to the other side, checking their phones with sudden, intense interest. I finally understood the scope of it when I logged into my dummy social media account. Cynthia had not just told people I left, she had crafted a saga. In her version of events, I was not the victim of a midnight eviction. I was the prodigal daughter who had rejected her family's love. I was the rebellious, ungrateful wild child who had chosen the streets over a warm bed because I did not want to follow rules. She told aunts and uncles that I had demanded money for drugs. She told the neighbors that I had threatened violence. She was painting over the truth with a thick coat of white lies. The worst part was that everyone was buying the paint. Then I saw Logan's contribution. It was a comment on one of Cynthia's long, tearful posts about how much she missed our complete family unit. A mutual friend had asked, "Why doesn't she just come home?" Logan had replied. "She chose this path. We tried everything. Some people just want to watch the world burn. We have to protect our peace." Reading those words felt like being punched in the solar plexus. Logan, who had watched me scrub the floors while he played video games. Logan, who had seen his mother throw my suitcase. He was not just a bystander anymore. He was an accomplice. By validating her narrative, he gave it credibility. If the brother said it was true, it must be true. The social pressure began to bleed into my real world. I was working a lunch shift at the diner on a Tuesday. The lunch rush was heavy, the air thick with the smell of frying onions and brewing coffee. I was refilling a coffee mug at table 4 when the woman sitting there looked up at me. She was wearing a heavy gold necklace and had the kind of haircut that cost more than my rent. "Wait," she said, her voice loud enough to carry over the clatter of silverware. "You are Grant Kensington's daughter, right?" I froze. The pot of coffee felt heavy in my hand. "I am Brielle," I said neutrally. "Can I get you anything else?" She scoffed, turning to her friend. "It is her," she said, pointing a manicured finger at me. "Cynthia was telling me about her at the club. The one who ran off to live with some boyfriend and broke her father's heart. I cannot believe you have the nerve to show your face in this town." The chatter in the diner dipped, heads turned. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, not from shame, but from a cold, sharp rage. I am just doing my job. Ma'am, I said. My manager, Sal, appeared at my elbow a moment later. He guided me back to the kitchen. Sal was a good man, but he ran a business, not a rehabilitation center. Brielle, look, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. I like you. You are a hard worker, but I cannot have drama at the tables. People come here to eat, not to gossip. If this keeps happening, I'm going to have to cut your shifts. I nodded. I did not argue. I could not afford to lose this job. It was my lifeline. I swallowed the scream that was clawing at my throat. I went back out, finished my shift, and smiled until my face hurt. But inside, I was filing away every slight, every glare, every whisper. That night, I did not sleep. I sat on the floor of my apartment with the documents Daphne had shown me, along with my own growing collection of evidence. I had a photo of the suitcase. I had a text from my father saying he was busy. I had the emails from Cynthia. And now, I had the credit reports. I spread them out like a map of a battlefield. I began to notice a pattern that made my blood run cold. In the file Daphne had given me, there were multiple credit applications, credit cards, personal loans, the second mortgage, all of them listed Brielle Kensington as a co-signer or a secondary guarantor. But next to my name, on every single document, was another name, Grant Kensington, my father. My stomach twisted. It was one thing for Cynthia to steal my identity. She was a predator. That was her nature. But my father. I looked at the dates, the signatures, on a loan application for a luxury vehicle. Presumably the one Logan was driving, my name was listed as the co-borrower. My father was the primary borrower. This was impossible. To add a co-borrower, you needed a social security number, a date of birth, and a signature. Grant had all of that information. He had my birth certificate in the safe. He knew my social security number by heart. He had set up my savings account when I was 6. The implication was terrifying. Either my father was actively conspiring with Cynthia to ruin me, or he was so negligently passive that he was signing documents without reading them, allowing her to guide his hand. I needed to know. I broke my rule. I sent a text to my father. Meet me. The coffee shop on 3rd. Tomorrow. 8 in the morning. Come alone, or I'm sending the police to the house. I did not wait for a reply. I knew he would come. The threat of police was the one thing that would terrify a man like Grant Kensington, who valued his reputation above his own blood. The coffee shop was quiet at 8 in the morning. I sat in the back corner, watching the door. When Grant walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked 10 years older than the last time I had seen him. His shoulders were slumped, his hair was thinning and gray, and he wore a suit that looked slightly too big for him, as if he were shrinking inside it. He scanned the room nervously, looking for anyone he might know. When he saw me, he hesitated, then walked over. He sat down opposite me. He did not hug me. He did not reach for my hand. Brielle, he said, his voice raspy. You look older. I am older. Dad, I said, I have been older for a long time. He looked at his hands, clasping them together on the table. Your mother. Cynthia. She is very upset. He said, she says you are spreading lies about us. I laughed. It was a sharp, humorless sound. Is that what she says? I asked. I reached into my bag and pulled out a photocopy of the vehicle loan application. I slid it across the table. Tell me, Dad, did I sign this? He looked at the paper. He squinted at the signature at the bottom. It was a scrawl that looked vaguely like mine, but the loop on the B was wrong. I do not know, he stammered. Look at the date. Dad, I said, that date is 6 months ago. I have not stepped foot in your house in years. I did not sign that. You are the primary borrower. You signed right next to it. Did you see me sign this? He went pale. He pulled at his collar. Cynthia handles the paperwork, he said. You know that. She brings me things to sign in the evenings. She says it is for business or for house maintenance. I trust her to handle the details. Do you trust her? I asked, my voice rising slightly. You trust the woman who threw your daughter out on the street?" He winced. It was a misunderstanding. "Brielle, we were just trying to teach you some independence. We thought you would come back after a few days. Apologize, and sign the contract." "The contract," I repeated. "The one that demanded rent I could not pay." He looked down at the table again. "She said you needed structure." I leaned forward. "Dad, look at the paper. That is fraud. That is a federal crime. You signed a document claiming I was present and consenting to a $40,000 debt. Do you understand what that means?" He looked up at me, his eyes wet with panic. "Brielle, please, do not make a scene. We are struggling. The business. The market has been hard. Cynthia is just trying to keep us afloat. She moves money around. It is complicated. It is not complicated." I said, "It is theft. She is using my name because you guys have maxed out yours, and you are letting her do it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a money clip. He fumbled with it, pulling out $300 bills. "Here," he said, pushing the money toward me. "Take this. Get yourself some nice clothes. We can fix this. Just do not go to the authorities. It would kill the business. It would kill Cynthia." I looked at the money, $300, the price of silence. I did not touch it. "I do not want your money." "Dad," I said, "I want you to stop. I want you to go home and take my name off everything, every account, every card, every loan." "I cannot," he whispered. We are underwater. Brielle, if we refinance now, or try to change the guarantors, the banks will call the loans. We will lose the house." I sat back. There it was. "So you are sacrificing me to save the house," I said. He did not answer. He just stared at the $300 on the table. I realized then that my father was not a victim. He was a hostage, yes, but a willing one. He had traded his integrity for a quiet life, and when the noise got too loud, he simply closed his eyes. He was not evil like Cynthia, but his weakness was a different kind of poison. It was the poison of inaction. I stood up. "Keep the money." "Grant," I said, "you are going to need it for the lawyers." I walked out of the coffee shop. I did not look back. I felt a strange sense of lightness. The hope I had been secretly harboring, the tiny, childish hope that my father would wake up and save me, was finally dead. And with its death, I was free. I owed him nothing. I went back to work. I buried myself in spreadsheets. I let the anger burn down into a cold, hard resolve. That night, around 11 o'clock, I was getting ready for bed in my small apartment. My phone pinged with an email notification. I had set up alerts for any credit inquiries or major status changes on the accounts I had managed to track down. I picked up the phone. The screen illuminated the dark room. Subject notice of default and intent to foreclose. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened the email. It was a forwarded alert from a credit monitoring service I had subscribed to using the information I had gathered. Regarding property 42 Highland Avenue, the Kensington residence, my childhood home. The house Cynthia was fighting so hard to keep, the house Mrs. Marlene lived next to. Status serious delinquency. Payment is 90 days past due. But that was not the part that made me stop breathing. It was the line below it. Secondary lien holder. HELOC. Home equity line of credit. Borrowers. Grant Kensington. Cynthia Kensington. Brielle Kensington. They had taken out a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit, and they had put my name on the deed to do it. I was not just a co-signer on a car. I was legally attached to a sinking ship. If that house went into foreclosure, the bank would not just come for Grant and Cynthia. They would come for me. They would garnish the wages I worked so hard for. They would destroy the credit score I was trying to rebuild. I stared at the glowing screen. Grant had said they were underwater. He had lied. They were drowning. And Cynthia had decided that if she was going down, she was going to chain me to her ankle. I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement. They wanted me to be part of the family. I would be part of the family. I was going to be the part that destroyed them. I realized that I had been playing checkers while Cynthia was playing three-dimensional chess. To beat her, I did not need more anger. I needed a better rule book. I needed to stop acting like a disgruntled daughter and start acting like a plaintiff. The next morning, I walked into Daphne's office and placed the foreclosure notice on her desk. I need a lawyer. I said, not a family lawyer. I need someone who specializes in financial warfare. Daphne looked at the paper, then at me. She nodded once, reached into her drawer, and pulled out a business card. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock with embossed black lettering. Miles Hart, Civil Litigation and Fraud Recovery. He is not nice, Daphne warned. He does not hold hands. But if someone stole a penny from him, he would spend $1 to get it back just to prove a point. He is exactly who you need. Miles Hart's office was in a glass building downtown, a world away from the dusty corners of Graybridge. He was a man of sharp angles, sharp nose, sharp suit, sharp eyes. He listened to my story without interrupting, his fingers steeping together like a cathedral roof. When I finished explaining the car loan, the credit cards, and the HELOC, he did not offer sympathy. He offered a strategy. We are going to surgically remove you from this mess. Brielle, he said, his voice dry and precise. But we have to do it in the correct order. Most people panic and do it backward. They call the parents. They scream. They threaten. That gives the fraudster time to hide assets or guilt-trip the victim. We are going to follow the triad of defense. He held up one finger. Step 1. The police report. You cannot dispute a federal debt based on "my stepmom is mean." You need an official record stating that a crime has occurred. Identity theft is a felony. We file a report against unknown perpetrators regarding the unauthorized use of your social security number. This creates a legal anchor. He held up a second finger. Step 2. The credit bureau dispute. Once we have the police report number, we freeze your credit with Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. We send them the report, legally. They must block the fraudulent accounts from your score within 4 business days. This stops the bleeding. He held up a third finger. Step 3. The demand letter. We do not send this to your parents. We send this to the lenders, the bank that issued the mortgage, the dealership that sold the car. We inform them that the contracts are void due to fraud and that you are not liable. When the banks realize they are holding bad paper, they will turn their cannons on the people who actually signed the documents. We let the banks be the bad guys. I looked at him. It was cold. It was efficient. It was perfect. Do it, I said. While Miles handled the filings, I went back to the evidence. I needed to understand the mechanics of the fraud. Cynthia was bold, but she was not a master criminal. She was a suburban socialite who thought she was untouchable, and arrogance always leaves fingerprints. I requested a copy of the original promissory note for the second mortgage from the county clerk's office. It was public record. When the PDF arrived in my inbox, I zoomed in on the signature page. There it was. Brielle Kensington. The handwriting was good. It had the general flow of my signature, but the capital B was too long. I write my B with a sharp vertical line. This B was soft, rounded. It was the way Cynthia wrote. But a mortgage requires a witness. A notary public has to physically watch you sign the paper and stamp it. I looked at the notary stamp next to the signature. Angela Vance, Notary Public. Commission expires. 2026. The name sounded familiar. I opened my dummy Facebook account and navigated to Cynthia's profile. I scrolled back 3 years. It took me an hour. But I found it. A photo from a ladies' night out at a local margarita bar. Cynthia was in the middle, holding a neon green drink, and there, with her arm draped around Cynthia's neck, was a woman tagged as Angela Vance. The caption read, "Best friends who bank together. Stay together, love my girl Angie." I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was not just forgery. This was conspiracy. Cynthia had used her friend at the bank to bypass the physical ID check. Angela Vance had stamped a document claiming I was present when I was likely scrubbing a grill at the diner. I saved the photo. I saved the profile. I saved the friends list. But I did not stop there. I began to look at where the money went. The second mortgage was for $150,000. The car was $40,000. The credit cards were another $20,000. That was over $200,000 of debt in 3 years. Grant's business was struggling, but it was not insolvent. Where was the cash going? I used the tools Daphne had taught me to look up public filings for nonprofits. Cynthia was always bragging about her charity work. She had founded a small organization called the Kensington Light Foundation, supposedly to help underprivileged youth. I pulled the tax returns for the foundation. They were public. The revenue line showed donations coming in mostly from Grant's business accounts, but the expense line was fascinating. 90% of the expenses were listed as administrative consulting and event planning. I dug deeper. The consulting firm receiving the payments was an LLC registered to a PEO box in a neighboring county. I ran a search on the LLC's registration. The registered agent was Cynthia Kensington. The picture snapped into focus. It was a circle. A washing machine. Grant's business made money. Cynthia moved that money into the charity to get a tax deduction. Then, the charity paid Cynthia's shell company for consulting, effectively putting the money back in her pocket. Tax-free and hidden from creditors. But the business was failing, so the flow had dried up. To keep the carousel spinning, to keep the appearances up, she had started borrowing, and when she maxed out her credit, and Grant's credit, she stole mine. She was not just in debt, she was running a Ponzi scheme in her own life. I was sitting in my apartment, staring at the flow chart I had drawn. When my phone rang, it was 1 a.m. The caller ID made my breath hitch. Dad. I had not spoken to him since the coffee shop. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but the investigator in me wanted to know. I picked it up. Hello, Brielle. His voice was thin, reedy. It sounded like he had been crying. Brielle. Are you there? I am here. Dad. You have to come home, he said. Just for a meeting. Please. We received a letter today. From the bank. They are freezing the accounts. They say there is a fraud investigation. I leaned back in my chair. Miles worked fast. I know. I said, you know? He sounded confused. Brielle, they are talking about criminal charges. They are talking about invalidating the mortgage. If they do that, they call the whole loan due immediately. We do not have $150,000. They will take the house. I looked at the timeline on my wall. Then you should not have signed my name. Dad, I did not. He protested, but his voice lacked conviction. I told you. I did not know. Then tell the police that... I said, tell them Cynthia forged it. If you are innocent, you have nothing to worry about. There was a scuffling sound on the other end of the line, a muffled argument. Then, a new voice cut through the static. Sharp, angry, familiar. You listen to me, you ungrateful little brat. It was Cynthia. You think you are so smart, she hissed. You think you can destroy this family from your little studio apartment. I am not destroying anything. Cynthia, I said, my voice steady. I am just correcting the record. You evicted me. Remember, you said I was an adult. Adults check their credit reports. You need to call this lawyer off, she demanded. You need to sign an affidavit stating that you gave verbal permission for the loan. We can say it was a misunderstanding. We can say you forgot. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh of disbelief. You want me to commit perjury to save you? I want you to save your father, she screamed. This will kill him. The stress will kill him. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the reason your father has a heart attack? It was her classic move. Weaponized guilt. She was holding my father hostage again, using his health as a bargaining chip. I looked at the photo of the suitcase she had sent me years ago. The caption, growing up. I have a question. Cynthia, I said. What she snapped. If I sign that paper, if I take on this debt, how exactly does that save him? The money is gone. You spent it on your shell company. You spent it on appearances. If I say the debt is mine, the bank still wants their money, and I do not have it. So the house gets foreclosed anyway. The only difference is that you stay out of jail. Silence on the other end. She had not expected me to know about the shell company. So let us be clear. I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. You do not want me to save Dad. You want me to save you. You want me to save your reputation. You want to keep playing the perfect mother at the country club while I pay for your margaritas? You owe us, she shrieked. We raised you. You threw me out like garbage, I corrected. And now the garbage is coming back to burn the house down. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from the sheer intensity of the truth. I had said it. I had finally said it. I turned off my phone. I needed to sleep. I had work in the morning, but the universe was not done with me yet. The next morning, I was at my desk at Graybridge, trying to focus on a legitimate client file, when my personal cell phone buzzed. It was a text message from Miles Hart. Call me. Now. Secure line. I grabbed my phone and walked out to the stairwell. It was the only place in the building with privacy. The concrete walls were cold and echoed with the sound of distant traffic. Miles, I asked, did the banks respond? This is not about the banks, Miles said. His voice was urgent, lacking its usual detached cool. We ran a full asset trace on your name, just to be thorough, to make sure there were no other liabilities we missed. And we found something, he said, but it is not a debt. It is an asset. I frowned. I do not have assets. Miles. I have a 10-year-old Honda and a savings account with $3,000 in it. Not in your current name, he said. It is listed under a trust structure, the Elena Kensington Testamentary. Trust. Elena, my mother, my biological mother. She had died when I was 6. I had few memories of her, just a scent of vanilla and the feeling of warm hands. Grant rarely spoke of her. Cynthia never allowed her name to be mentioned. That trust has been dormant for 12 years. Miles continued. It was set up to mature when you turn 25. But here's the thing. Brielle, the trustee is listed as Grant Kensington. Okay, I said, leaning against the concrete wall. My dad is the trustee. So, Miles said, his voice dropping. Someone tried to access it yesterday. Someone with the login credentials for the trustee account tried to initiate a liquidation of the assets. They tried to drain it. My stomach dropped. Did they get it? I asked. No, Miles said. The bank flagged it because of the fraud alert we put on your file yesterday. The system froze the transaction. But Brielle, do you know what is in that trust? I have no idea, I whispered. It is not cash, Miles said. It is a deed, a title to a property in the historic district, and based on current market valuation, it is worth more than the Kensington house and Grant's business combined. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold concrete steps. My mother had left me a house, a safety net, a future, and for 15 years, my father had hidden it from me. And yesterday, when the walls started closing in, Cynthia, because I knew it was her, had tried to sell it to save herself. They had not just stolen my credit, they had tried to steal my inheritance. Miles, I said, my voice trembling with a new, dangerous kind of calm. What do you want to do? He asked. I do not just want to defend myself anymore. I said, I want to go on the offensive. I want that file. I want that deed, and I want to know exactly who tried to sell it. We can get the IP address of the login attempt, Miles said. Get it, I said. And Miles, when we serve them with the lawsuit, I want to be the one to hand it to them. The discovery of the Elena Kensington Testamentary Trust was like finding a pulse in a body everyone had declared dead. I sat in Miles Hart's conference room, staring at the leather-bound binder that contained the legacy of a woman I barely remembered. My mother, Elena, she had not been rich, but she had been careful. She had taken out a life insurance policy and placed a small piece of commercial real estate into a trust, specifically designated to mature when I turned 25. The math was simple. I was now 33. The trust had matured 8 years ago, but because the trustee, my father, had never informed me, the assets had sat there, appreciating in silence. Miles flipped a page in the binder. Here's the smoking gun. Brielle, he said. He pointed to a document dated the day after my 18th birthday. It was a copy of the voluntary departure and waiver of residency agreement Cynthia had tried to force me to sign in the kitchen, the one I had refused. I leaned in, reading the fine print for the first time. Hidden amidst the paragraphs about chores and rent was a clause written in dense legalese, the undersigned, hereby waives any and all claims to familial assets, future inheritances, or existing trusts under the guardianship of Grant Kensington. My blood ran cold. She knew, I whispered. She knew about the trust. Of course she knew, Miles said, his voice flat. She tried to get you to sign your rights away for free. When you refused to sign and left, she probably thought she could just wait you out. But now that the family money is drying up, she got desperate. She tried to crack the trust open herself. This changed everything. This was not just a stepmother who didn't like her stepdaughter. This was a long game. Cynthia had not just evicted me because I was an inconvenience. She had evicted me because I was a liability to her bank account. I looked up at Miles. "Bring him in," I said. We had arranged for Grant to meet us here. We told him it was a settlement discussion. We did not tell him that Cynthia was not invited. When my father walked into the conference room, he looked like a man walking to the gallows. He sat at the far end of the mahogany table, wringing his hands. He looked at Miles, then at me, then at the pitcher of water in the center of the table. I did not offer him a glass. "Dad," I said, sliding the trust document toward him, "did you know this existed?" He looked at the paper. He didn't need to read it. He knew what it was. "Yes," he said softly. "Your mother. She wanted you to have something." "Then why?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously low. "Did you let Cynthia try to liquidate it yesterday?" Grant flinched. "I didn't. I mean, we talked about it. We needed liquidity. The business is—" "Stop talking about the business." I slammed my hand on the table. The sound echoed in the quiet room. "This is not the business. This is my mother. This is the woman you married before her. You let your new wife try to rob your dead wife's daughter. Is that who you are now?" Grant put his head in his hands. His shoulders began to shake. I did not want to fight. He sobbed. It was pathetic. It was the sound of a man who had hollowed himself out. She screams, "Brielle, you do not know what it is like." She threatens to leave. She threatens to tell everyone that I'm a failure. She says I ruined her life. I just wanted peace. Peace. I repeated. The word tasted like ash. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fear etched into the lines of his face. He was not a monster. He was a coward, and in some ways, that was worse. A monster has a code. A coward has only survival instincts. I stood up and walked over to him. "You have a choice. Dad, right now, today." I placed a single sheet of paper in front of him. It was an affidavit Miles had drafted. It stated that Grant Kensington had no knowledge of the fraudulent signatures and that he authorized the full prosecution of the parties responsible. "Sign this," I said. "Help me stop her. Admit that she forged the documents. If you do this, Miles can shield you. We can argue you were under duress, but you have to turn on her." He looked at the pen. His hand hovered over it. I can't," he whispered. "She will destroy me." "She is already destroying you," I shouted. "She has spent your money, ruined your credit, and turned your son into an accomplice. What is left to save?" Before he could answer, the heavy glass door of the conference room swung open. There was no receptionist to stop them because they had likely barged past security. Cynthia stood there, wearing a beige trench coat and a look of pure venom. Logan was right behind her, looking like a college athlete ready for a brawl. Cynthia barked, "Get away from her!" Grant recoiled, pulling his hand away from the affidavit as if it were red hot. "Mom!" Logan stepped forward, pointing a finger at me. "You cannot just ambush Dad like this. This is harassment." I turned to my stepbrother. He was wearing a watch that cost $5,000. I wondered if he knew it was paid for with a credit card in my name. "Harassment?" I asked. "Logan, do you even know why we are here? Do you know your mother tried to sell a house that belongs to me?" "She is trying to save this family," Logan shouted. His face was flushed. "Since you left, everything has been hard. Mom works herself to death trying to keep the image up, trying to keep Dad's business relevant. And all you do is throw stones from the outside. You are selfish. Brielle. You always have been." I laughed. It was a dry, bitter sound. Saving the family, I asked. Is that what you call it? Or is she saving her country club membership? Is she saving your tuition, Logan? Half the things you own are paid for with debt that has my name on it. You are driving a stolen car. He faltered, looking at his mother. That is a lie, he said. But his voice lacked conviction. It is not a lie. Cynthia stepped in, her voice icy. It is a management strategy. We are a family unit. Resources are shared. Resources are shared. I turned on her. I was evicted. Cynthia, you threw me out. You cannot kick someone off the boat and then ask them to row. I raised you, she screamed. The mask finally slipped. The calm, suburban matriarch was gone, replaced by something feral. I fed you for 10 years, she continued, stepping closer. I washed your clothes. I drove you to school. I put a roof over your head when your father was too busy working to even look at you. I sacrificed my best years dealing with a sullen, ungrateful stepchild who never loved me. I deserve that money. I stood my ground. I was not 18 anymore. I was not the girl shivering on the porch. You did not raise me, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. You tolerated me. And the moment I became legally independent, you discarded me. You did not raise a daughter. Cynthia, you curated an image. You kept me around as a prop for your Christmas cards until I got too big for the frame. You are nothing, she spat. You are trash. I told you that 15 years ago, and yet, I said, here you are, trying to steal from the trash. Grant, let's go, she commanded. Grabbing my father's arm, he stood up, obedient as a dog. If you walk out that door, Grant, I said, looking my father in the eye, I filed the lawsuit against both of you. No deals, no immunity. You go down with her. Grant looked at me. His eyes were swimming with tears. I am sorry. Brielle, he whispered. He let Cynthia drag him toward the door. But just before they crossed the threshold, Cynthia stopped. She turned back to me, her eyes gleaming with a malicious idea. You think you can sue us? She sneered. You think you can take everything? Go ahead. Try. But remember one thing, Brielle, if you do not sign those papers, if you do not help us cover this debt, you will get nothing. That trust, I will tie it up in litigation for 20 years. I will bleed it dry with legal fees. You will never see a dime. She slammed the door. The room fell silent. I stood there, shaking. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving me feeling hollow. My father had made his choice. He had chosen the abuser over the victim because the abuser was louder. I looked at Miles. He was sitting calmly at the end of the table. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a small black digital recorder. He tapped the stop button. Did you get it? I asked. Miles allowed himself a very small, very shark-like smile. I deserve that money. If you do not sign, you get nothing. He quoted her perfectly. In this state, threatening to destroy an asset to coerce a signature on a fraudulent document is considered extortion. And since this meeting was ostensibly for settlement negotiation, and she barged in uninvited to make threats, she just handed us a felony on a silver platter. Do we have her? I asked. We have her, Miles said. I sat down. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. I had the evidence. I had the moral high ground. But I had lost my father permanently. I went home to my apartment. I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the city lights. I thought the day was over. I thought the next move was mine. I was wrong. At 8 o'clock that evening, a courier knocked on my door. He handed me a thick envelope. It was not from a court. It was a personal demand letter, drafted by a lawyer I did not know, but signed by Cynthia Kensington. I opened it. It was an invoice, itemized bill for services. Rendered rearing and maintenance of Brielle Kensington. Room and board, age 818. $120,000. Food and utilities. $40,000. Transportation and clothing, $15,000. Emotional distress and parental labor. $50,000. Total due. $225,000. Attached was a letter. Dear Brielle, Since you wish to treat family matters as transactional legal disputes, we are happy to oblige. You claim we owe you for the use of your credit. We claim you owe us for your survival. If you proceed with your lawsuit, we will file a countersuit for unjust enrichment. You lived in our house. You ate our food. Now, you can pay for it. I stared at the paper. It was insane. No court would uphold a parent charging a minor child for existing. It was legally baseless, but that was not the point. The point was the cruelty. The point was that she had sat down, calculated the cost of every sandwich I had ever eaten, every kilowatt of electricity I had used, and put a price tag on my childhood. She was trying to tell me that I had never been a daughter. I had been a tenant, and now the landlord was collecting back rent. I dropped the letter on the floor. I walked to my desk. I pulled out the file from the shelter. I pulled out the map. She wanted a transaction. She wanted to talk about the cost of housing fine. I picked up my phone and called Miles. "Wake up, Miles," I said. "We are filing the police report tonight and add a new charge." "What charge?" he asked. Sleepily, "Blackmail," I said, and Miles released the recording to the insurance company. "Let us burn it all down." The timeline of trauma is rarely linear. It circles back, ghost-like, haunting you just when you think you have finally exorcised the house. I am 33 years old now. I had a career, a reputation, and an apartment that did not smell like industrial cleaner. I had built a fortress of solitude and success around myself. But Cynthia Kensington had found a way to breach the walls. She did not use a battering ram. She used a crowdfunding link. It started on a Tuesday evening. My phone, usually reserved for work emails and the occasional text from Daphne, began to vibrate with a ferocity that suggested a natural disaster. It skittered across my coffee table, lighting up the dim room. I picked it up. A Facebook notification, then another, then 50 more. "You have been tagged in a post by Cynthia Kensington." My stomach turned over. I had blocked her. But she had made the post public, and mutual contacts, people from my high school, distant cousins, neighbors I had not seen in a decade, were tagging me in the comments. I opened the link. The banner image was a close-up of Cynthia. She looked frail, her usually immaculate hair slightly disheveled, her skin pale. She was lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to an IV drip. It was a masterpiece of staging. The title of the campaign screamed in bold font, "Help a Mother Survive. Urgent Heart Surgery." Needed, the goal. $50,000. I began to read the description. It was written in that breathless, pleading style that Cynthia had perfected over years of manipulating my father. "Dear friends and family, it breaks my heart to ask, but I have nowhere left to turn. My heart is failing. The doctors say I need an urgent valve reconstruction surgery within the week, or I will not make it to Christmas. The insurance has denied the claim. The cost is $50,000. Payable immediately to secure the operating theater. I have given my life to raising my family. I have poured every ounce of love into my children. But now, in my darkest hour, I am alone. My husband's business has collapsed. And my daughter, Brielle Kensington, who is now a successful risk management director, has turned her back on me. She has the means to save my life with the stroke of a pen, but she refuses to answer my calls. She has chosen her money over her mother's life. Please, if you can spare anything, I do not want to die." I sat there, frozen. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. She had weaponized her own mortality, real or imagined, and pointed it directly at my career. Then I scrolled to the comments. "How could a daughter be so cold?" wrote Mrs. Gable. "My old Sunday school teacher, Brielle. I am praying for your soul. Money is not everything," wrote a cousin I had not spoken to since I was 12. "Some people forget where they came from. Shame on you," wrote a stranger. It was a digital lynching. Cynthia had simplified the narrative to a binary choice: the saintly, dying mother versus the greedy, heartless daughter. She had omitted the eviction. She had omitted the fraud. She had omitted the stolen identity. My phone rang. It was Logan. I stared at the screen. I knew I should not answer. Daphne would tell me not to answer. Miles would tell me to record it. I hit accept and put it on speaker. I hit the record button on my laptop simultaneously. "Hello, Logan. You are a monster." He spat. No greeting, just pure, unfiltered rage. "Hello to you too," I said, keeping my voice level. "Did you see it?" he demanded. "Did you see the post Mom is lying in a hospital bed? Brielle, she is terrified, and you are sitting there in your fancy apartment acting like you do not exist. I am looking at the post." "Logan," I said, $50,000 for a heart valve. "Since when does St. Jude's require cash up front for life-saving surgery?" "Do not pivot to your actuary logic," he screamed. "This is real life." "The insurance lapsed because Dad missed the premiums. The hospital wants a deposit. $50,000 is a very round number for a deposit," I noted. "You have 48 hours, Logan said, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "If that money is not in the account in 48 hours, she dies. And if she dies, Brielle, I will make sure the entire world knows it was your fault. I will go to the press. I will go to your boss. I will ruin you." I felt a flash of heat, but I pushed it down. This was the trap. React, and I lose. "Send me the bill." I said. "What?" "Send me the itemized invoice from the hospital," I said calmly, "and the name of the attending cardiologist. If this is legitimate, I will pay the hospital directly. I will not send cash to a crowdfunding site." "She does not have time for your paperwork," Logan yelled. 48 hours. Logan, send the bill. Or do not call me again." I hung up. My hands were trembling, not from guilt, but from the pressure. The walls were closing in. I could feel the eyes of the community on me. My LinkedIn profile was already getting views from people with the last name Kensington. She was coming for my livelihood. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged, a photo message from Logan. It was a picture of a piece of paper. It was blurry, taken in bad lighting. It looked like a hospital invoice. I could see the logo of St. Jude's. I could see the words, cardiac intervention. But the bottom half of the page, the part with the breakdown of costs and the insurance adjustments, was cut off. The total due was handwritten in blue ink at the top. $50,000. I forwarded the image to Miles. "Check this. Now." Miles called me back within 20 minutes. "It is a fabrication. Brielle," he said, his voice crisp, or at least a manipulation. "Explain." I said, "I called the billing department at St. Jude's. I did not use names, just asked about policy. They never, under any circumstances, demand $50,000 upfront for emergency cardiac surgery. If it is an emergency, they are legally required to stabilize the patient regardless of ability to pay. If it is elective, they set up a payment plan." "So she is not dying?" I asked. "She might be sick." Miles admitted. "She might need surgery, but this demand for cash. This isn't for the hospital." I looked at the number again. $50,000. It clicked. "It is the settlement," I whispered. "The settlement Miles asked. The fraud investigation." I said, "The banks offered them a deal last week to avoid criminal charges if they paid back a portion of the stolen funds. The number they discussed, it was roughly $50,000. Miles let out a low whistle. "So she is using the sympathy of strangers and your reputation to pay off the debt she incurred by stealing your identity," he said. "That is diabolical. It is Cynthia." I said. I hung up the phone. I sat in my living room, the blue light of the laptop illuminating the hate comments rolling in on her post. The donation counter was ticking up. $500, $1,000. People were giving their grocery money to a woman who was scamming them, and everyone was waiting for me to break. They wanted me to be the villain so they could feel righteous, or they wanted me to be the savior so the story could have a happy ending. I decided to be neither. I decided to be a mirror. I went to my desk. I opened a drawer where I kept my old files, the ones from the shelter days. I pulled out a large manila envelope. I did not write a check. Instead, I began to print documents. First, I printed the application form for St. Jude's Charity Care Program. It was a program designed for indigent patients, for giving up to 100% of medical debt if the patient could prove financial hardship. Second, I printed the eligibility requirements for emergency Medicaid in our state. Third, I printed a list of local food banks and utility assistance programs. Fourth, I printed the contact information for the state's Department of Elder Affairs hotline, specifically highlighting the section on financial exploitation. And finally, I went to Google Maps. I typed in the address of the Kensington residence. Then I typed in the address of the barely audible, the shelter where I had slept on a plastic mattress 15 years ago. I printed the route. I stacked the papers neatly. On top of the stack, I placed a sticky note. I picked up a pen and wrote a single sentence. This is what I had when I was 18. I put the stack in the envelope. I sealed it. I drove to the courier service across town that stayed open late. I want this delivered tomorrow morning. I told the clerk. Signature required. I went home and waited. The next morning, I went to work. I kept my head down. I avoided checking social media. I focused on a forensic audit of a construction company. At 10:30 in the morning, my phone buzzed. Delivery confirmed. Signed by L. Kensington. The bait was taken. I waited for the explosion. I expected a text. I expected a call. I did not expect the notification that came an hour later. Cynthia Kensington has updated her status. I opened the app. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Cynthia had posted a photo. It was a picture of the envelope I had sent. She had opened it. She had arranged the contents on the hospital bed tray table, but she had removed the charity care forms. She had removed the Medicaid information. The only thing visible in the photo was the map to the homeless shelter. Her caption was short, brutal, and designed to incite a riot. I asked my daughter for help to save my life. I asked for mercy. In response, she sent me a map to a homeless shelter. She wants me on the street. She wants me dead. This is the face of evil. The post had been up for 10 minutes. It already had 2,000 shares. The comments were nuclear. She is a demon. Someone needs to find where this girl works. How can a human being be this cruel? My blood ran cold. She had taken my message, my attempt to show her the reality she had forced me into, and twisted it into a weapon of mass destruction. She had stripped away the context of the resources and left only the insult. I watched the share count tick up. 3,000, 4,000. My work email pinged. Subject urgent. HR. Our meeting regarding social media conduct. She had done it. She had brought the mob to my doorstep. But as I stared at the photo of the map on her hospital tray, I noticed something she had missed in her haste to play the victim. In the corner of the photo, partially covered by the map, was another piece of paper on the tray table. It was the real hospital discharge summary, and the text, though small, was legible if you zoomed in. Diagnosis: panic attack, anxiety, condition stable, discharge approved. She wasn't dying. She was discharged. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. She had posted the evidence of her own lie, and she had tagged me in it. I did not go to HR. I sat down at my keyboard. It was time to comment. The internet is a strange beast. It eats tragedy and excretes judgment. Within 24 hours of Cynthia's post going viral, the world had divided itself into two distinct camps. The first camp, the larger and louder one, saw me as a monster. I was the daughter who sent a dying woman a map to a homeless shelter. They called my workplace. They flooded my inbox with hate mail, and they doxed my old address. To them, I was the embodiment of ungrateful privilege. But then, a second camp began to emerge. It started with a few quiet voices in the comment sections. People who noticed the discrepancies. People who asked uncomfortable questions. Wait. One user wrote, "Why is the daughter sending a map to a shelter? Was she homeless? You don't send that kind of thing unless you have been there." "If the mom is dying," another wrote, "why is she posting on Facebook instead of talking to doctors? And since when do hospitals take cash deposits for emergency surgery?" I watched the tide shift from my desk at Graybridge. My HR director had called me that morning. She was holding a stack of printout screenshots of the hate comments. "Brielle," she had said, looking over her glasses, "this is becoming a distraction. We support you, but the company reputation is taking a hit. You need to resolve this." I resolved it. I did not record a tearful apology video. I did not go on a talk show. I did not engage in a screaming match in the comments. I did what Daphne had taught me to do. I presented the data. I logged into my account. I composed a single post. No emotional language. No adjectives. Just a bulleted list titled Timeline of Events. January 1st, 15 years ago. Evicted from Kensington residence at age 18, given zero financial support. January 5th, 15 years ago. Credit card opened in my name without consent. Status defaulted. 3 years ago. Vehicle loan opened in my name as cosigner without consent. Status defaulted. 6 months ago. Unauthorized attempt to liquidate the Elena Kensington Trust. Failed. Yesterday. Request for $50,000 for a surgery that insurance covers, coinciding exactly with the amount needed to settle a fraud investigation. I did not send a map to be cruel. I sent a map because that is where I lived when I was 18. If you want the truth, ask for the receipts. I have mine. I hit the post. The reaction was immediate. The internet loves a villain, but it loves a receipt even more. The comments stopped calling me a monster and started tagging Cynthia. Is this true? Did you steal her identity? Show us the denial letter from the insurance company. Cynthia did not reply publicly. She went dark. But 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I did not recognize. You ungrateful witch. You take that down immediately. If you post one more thing, I will call every client in your portfolio and tell them you are mentally unstable. I will ruin your career like I ruined your relationship with your father. I took a screenshot. I sent it to Miles. Add this to the harassment file. I typed, I thought that was the end of the skirmish for the day. I was wrong. The real blow came an hour later, and it did not come from social media. It came from a landline. It was the billing department at St. Jude's Hospital. Miss Kensington, a woman asked. Her voice was stern. We are calling to verify the billing information you provided for your mother's admission. I frowned, putting the phone to my ear. I am sorry, I said. I did not provide any billing information. The woman sighed, the sound of someone used to dealing with payment dodgers. Miss Kensington, your mother, Cynthia Kensington, listed you as the primary financial guarantor for her admission yesterday. She provided your social security number, your current address, and your employer's contact information. She signed the responsibility waiver on your behalf, stating you were present but stepped out to park the car. The room spun. She did what I asked, my voice rising. She listed you as the guarantor. The woman repeated, We have generated the preliminary invoice for her stay and the diagnostic tests. Since the insurance on file is currently suspended for non-payment, the liability falls to you. We need to set up a payment method for the $4,000 accrued so far. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. This was the trap. The crowdfunding was just the cherry on top. The real cake was the hospital bill. Cynthia knew Grant had let the insurance lapse. She knew the hospital would come after the money. So she walked in there, forged my signature again, and legally tied me to her debt. If she had surgery, real or fake, I would be on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if she disappeared or refused to pay, the hospital would sue me. I am not the guarantor. I said, my voice shaking with rage. I was not there. I did not sign that paper. Ma'am, we have a signature. It is a forgery, I shouted. Listen to me very carefully. That woman has been stealing my identity for 15 years. I have an active police report filed against her. If you try to bill me for 1 cent, my lawyer will sue this hospital for negligence so fast your head will spin. There was a stunned silence on the other end. I see, the woman stammered. I am hanging up now. I said, you will hear from Miles Hart within the hour. I called Miles. I did not even have to finish the sentence. She listed you as the guarantor, he asked. His voice sharp. Yes, that is it, Miles said. That is the nail in the coffin. That is not just family drama. That is medical fraud. It is a federal offense. I am sending a cease and desist to the hospital's legal department right now. I am attaching the police report number. They will lock that account down instantly. And Cynthia, I asked. Miles let out a dark chuckle. when the hospital compliance officer walks into her room and tells her that her guarantor has flagged the account for fraud. They are going to demand an immediate alternative form of payment, or they will discharge her. She's going to have to produce a credit card that works, and we both know she does not have one. I sat back in my chair. I waited. I imagined the scene. Cynthia, lying in the hospital bed, scrolling through Facebook, watching the public opinion turn against her. Then, the door opens. A suit walks in. Not a doctor, a compliance officer. He tells her the jig is up. He tells her that Brielle Kensington has disputed the signature. He asks for a Visa card, and she has nothing. The fallout happened faster than I expected. At 4 p.m, my phone rang. It was Grant. I hesitated, but something in my gut told me to answer. Hello? Dad? He sounded wrecked. His voice was a rasp, like he had been screaming for hours. She called me, he whispered. Who, Cynthia? She is screaming. She is at the hospital. They told her she has to leave. They told her the fraud alert was triggered. I remained silent. She told them it was a mistake. Grant continued. She told them you were confused. She tried to hand the phone to me, to make me vouch for her, to make me give them my credit card. And did you? I asked. There was a long pause. My card is maxed out. Brielle, he said, you know that. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't. So what happened? She threw the phone against the wall. He said, she started screaming that I was useless, that I was a weak man who couldn't provide for his wife. She said she should have left me years ago and taken the house then. He took a jagged breath. She admitted it. Brielle, in her anger, she said, I should have just forged his signature better. She wasn't talking about you. She was talking about me. The silence stretched between us. The veil had finally lifted. For 15 years, Grant had told himself that Cynthia was aggressive but loving, that she did these things to save the family. But in that moment of crisis, when she was cornered, she had turned on him. She had revealed that he was just another resource to be exploited. Just like me. Dad, I said softly, you have to stop her. I know, he said. I am at home. She is still at the hospital. Trying to argue with the discharge nurse. I am studying. Go to the safe, Dad, I said. Safe, the documents. I said, the ones she keeps locked away, the originals, the birth certificates, the trust deed, and Mom's things. He hesitated. She will kill me if I touch them. She is already killing you. Dad, I said, she is drowning you. This is your only life raft. If you give those papers to Miles, if you cooperate, we can prove she acted alone. We can save you from the fraud charges, but you have to choose, right now. I heard the sound of a tumbler clicking, the sound of a heavy metal door swinging open. Grant was opening the safe. I have them, he whispered. Bring them to Miles. I said, do not wait for her to come home. Just get in the car and drive. I will meet you there, he said. An hour later, I was in Miles's office. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the mahogany table. The door opened, and Grant walked in. He was carrying a metal lockbox. He looked like a refugee fleeing a war zone. He placed the box on the table and sat down, burying his face in his hands. Miles put on a pair of latex gloves. He opened the box. It was a treasure trove of evidence. There were credit card applications with my name practiced in the margins. There were letters from debt collectors that I had never seen, hidden away. There were notarized documents with the stamp of Angela Vance, signed while I was in another state, but at the bottom of the box, underneath the layers of deceit, was a thick envelope made of yellowed paper. It had my name on it, Brielle. The handwriting was not Cynthia's. It was an elegant, looping script. That is Elena's handwriting. Grant whispered, looking up. She wrote that. Shortly before she passed, she told me to keep it for you. She said Cynthia was not to see it. I reached out. My hand was shaking. I took the envelope. It felt heavy, like it contained more than just paper. I opened it. Inside were the original deed to the trust property. my birth certificate, and a handwritten letter. I unfolded the letter. The date at the top was from 20 years ago. My mother had written this when she was sick, when she knew she was not going to make it. My dearest Brielle, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are grown. I hope you are happy. I hope you are strong. I have left you a small safety net. Your father is a good man, but he is weak. He avoids conflict like a plague. I worry about who will come after me. I worry that he will let someone into our home who does not understand the value of what we built. I have met the woman he is seeing. Cynthia. She smiles too much, and she asks too many questions about the house deed. I do not trust her. Brielle, I have a feeling in my bones. I have locked this trust so that only you can access it. But listen to me. If the day comes that Cynthia tries to touch this fund, if she tries to get you to sign anything, do not trust her. Do not trust your father to protect you. He will choose the path of least resistance. If she touches this money, it means she has already spent everything else. It means she is dangerous. Be smarter than us. Be safe. Love, Mom. I lowered the letter. The room was silent. My mother knew. 20 years ago. From her deathbed. She had seen exactly who Cynthia was. She had predicted this moment. She had warned me that my father would fail me. I looked at Grant. He was staring at the letter, tears streaming down his face. He knew what it said. He had kept it in the safe for 20 years, likely too afraid to read it, but too guilty to destroy it. She knew. Grant whispered, Elena knew. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. It was not just a letter, it was a shield. Miles, I said, my voice steady. Yes. Scan everything in this box. I said, every scrap of paper. We are not just suing for fraud anymore. I looked at the pile of forged documents. We are going racketeering. I said, we are going to prove a pattern of calculated predations spanning 2 decades. Miles nodded. I can build that case, he said. But before we could celebrate the victory of securing the evidence, my phone buzzed again. It was a notification from my bank, my personal checking account, the one I used for my rent, my bills, my life, alert account frozen, garnishment order received. I stared at the screen. What is it? Miles asked, seeing my face. She did something. I whispered. I opened the details. The garnishment order was not from a bank. It was not from the hospital. It was from a small claims court judgment. Creditor, Cynthia Kensington. Reason unpaid promissory note. I looked at Miles. She filed a default judgment against me. I said, she must have forged a summons proof of service. She went to court while I was at work, claimed I didn't show up, and got a judge to garnish my account for. I checked the amount. $5,000. It was petty. It was small compared to the millions at stake. But it was a message. She was telling me that even if I had the evidence, even if I had the truth, she could still reach into my pocket and take what was mine. She is not at the hospital, I said. Standing up, Grant looked up, terrified. Where is she? She is at the courthouse, I said, or she was. I grabbed my coat. Miles, file the emergency motion to unfreeze the account. Dad, stay here. Do not leave this room. Where are you going? Miles asked. I am going to finish this. I said, I was not going to the courthouse. I was going to the one place I knew she would retreat to when the walls closed in. The place she thought was her castle. I was going to the house. The police station was a study in fluorescent purgatory. I sat on a hard plastic chair, watching a detective named Miller type my statement into a computer system that looked like it predated the internet. I had handed over the binder, the Kensington dossier, as Miles called it. It contained the affidavits, the timeline, the forged signatures, and the letter from my mother. You understand what happens next, Ms. Kensington Detective Miller asked, not looking up from his typing. Once we file this, it becomes a matter of public record. We will issue a warrant for questioning. We will subpoena the bank records. There is no taking it back because you feel bad for your dad. I do not feel bad. I said, I feel accurate. Filing the police report for identity theft was the nuclear option. It triggered an automatic freeze on the fraudulent accounts. The credit bureaus responded within 48 hours. The credit cards, the ones used for Logan's tuition and Cynthia's wardrobe, were flagged as account takeover and removed from my report. My score jumped 100 points in a day. But the home equity line of credit, the HELOC, was different, because Grant was a legitimate borrower on the loan, and because I was listed as a co-borrower on the deed. The bank refused to simply erase it. They viewed it as a civil dispute between owners. To get my name off that $150,000 debt, I would have to prove in a court of law that my signature on the deed was forged. And that meant I had to drag my father's house into a foreclosure lawsuit. Cynthia felt the walls closing in. The hospital had already flagged her account. The crowdfunding site had suspended her campaign pending an investigation into the misleading allocation of funds. So, she did what a narcissist does when cornered. She changed the narrative. She posted a video. I watched it in my office with Daphne. In the video, Cynthia was sitting in her living room, wearing no makeup, wrapped in a knitted blanket. She looked small. She looked fragile. She was crying, but not the hysterical screaming I had heard on the phone. This was a soft, weeping performance. My daughter is abusing me. She sobbed into the camera. Not physically, but she is tormenting me with lawsuits. She is trying to evict her own father. I am sick. I have a heart condition. And the stress is killing me. She knows this. She is trying to induce a heart attack so she can get her inheritance early. It was masterfully twisted. She took my defensive actions trying to clear my name and frame them as offensive attacks on her health. Daphne paused the video. She is good, Daphne admitted. She makes you look like a vulture circling a dying animal. She is not dying, I said, tapping the screen. Look at the timestamp. That was uploaded at 10 in the morning. At 10 in the morning. Her lawyer was emailing Miles, asking for a settlement meeting. She is not sick. She is negotiating. The pressure worked on one person. Though, Logan, my stepbrother, showed up at my apartment building that evening. He did not buzz up. He waited by my car in the parking garage. When I saw him, I reached for the pepper spray on my keychain. I am not here to fight, he said, raising his hands. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was wearing the same clothes he had on the day before. What do you want? Logan. Is it true, he asked? His voice was trembling. The things you posted, the timeline, the credit cards. Is it true I unlocked my car and tossed my bag in, keeping the door between us? Go ask your mother. I said, I did. He whispered. She told me to shut up. She told me that I should be grateful because she did it for me. He looked up at me, and for the first time in his life, he looked like a frightened child, not the golden prince. I went to the financial aid office at school today. Brielle, I wanted to check my loans. I wanted to see. And there are 3 loans in my name, he said, plus parent, plus loans. But the cosigner, it is not Dad. It is you. I closed my eyes. Of course it was. She had maxed out everyone else. I did not sign those. Logan. I said, I know. He said, because the date on the last one, I was with you that day. It was the day you graduated from community college. I saw you walk across the stage. You were nowhere near a bank. He leaned against the concrete pillar. If you sue her, he said, his voice cracking, if you prove the fraud, they will revoke the loans. I will get kicked out of school. They will take my degree. I looked at him. This was the collateral damage. He had benefited from the crime. Yes, but he had been unaware of the cost. I cannot stop the train. Logan, I said, she put us all on the tracks. You need to get a lawyer, a separate one. Do not use hers. He nodded, wiping his eyes. He walked away, shoulders slumped. He was realizing that his entire future was built on a foundation of sand and stolen ink. The next day, the bombshell dropped. Miles called me. We had a breakdown. He said, the forensic accountant finished analyzing the medical fund she was trying to raise. Tell me, I said, the $50,000. Miles explained, it was never just for surgery. The actual co-pay for her valve procedure, which is necessary but not an emergency, is $4,000. So where was the other 46,000 going? Miles rustled some papers. 20,000 was earmarked for the arrears on the HELOC to stop the foreclosure. 10,000 was for a retainer for a criminal defense attorney. And the rest, it was going to pay off the credit card she used to buy Logan's car. Because that payment is 90 days late and they are about to repo it. I laughed. A cold, hard laugh. She was crowdfunding her legal defense against me. I said, she was asking the internet to pay the lawyer she hired to fight the daughter she stole from. Grant finally broke. When Miles sent the breakdown to my father, showing exactly how Cynthia was using the surgery money, Grant filed for legal separation. He moved into a motel on the edge of town. Cynthia's reaction was volcanic. She called him 60 times in 1 hour. She left voicemails screaming that he was abandoning a dying woman. "You cannot leave me when I need to be cut open," she screamed on one message that Grant forwarded to us. "The public will crucify you." She was still playing to the audience, even in private. But she knew she was losing, so she tried one last gambit. She requested a family mediation. My Aunt Sarah Grant's sister called me. She was a woman who believed that blood was thicker than felonies. "Brielle," she said sternly, "this has gone too far. Your mother's stepmother is terrified. Your father is living in a Motel 6. We are holding a meeting at my house. Sunday, 2 o'clock. You need to come and finish this. I am not coming to be yelled at." "Aunt Sarah, you are coming to make peace," she said, "or you are admitting that you do not care about this family." I hung up. I called Miles. "Should I go?" "Go?" Miles said, "But wear a wire. And take the file. If they want a meeting, give them a trial. Sunday afternoon." Aunt Sarah's living room. It smelled of potpourri and tension. Cynthia was there, lying on the sofa with a blanket, playing the invalid. Grant sat in a corner, looking at the floor. Logan stood by the window, refusing to look at anyone. A half-dozen aunts, uncles, and cousins sat in a semicircle, looking at me like I was the defendant. "Brielle," Aunt Sarah started, "we are here because we love you. But this legal business, it is tearing everyone apart. Cynthia is willing to offer a compromise." Cynthia sat up weakly. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "I forgive you." "Brielle," she said. Her voice was trembling. "I forgive you for the stress you have caused. And I have a proposal. If you transfer $50,000 to the account just to cover the medical bills and the house arrears, I will sign a document releasing you from any future debt. I will fix your credit. We can just make this go away." The room nodded. It sounded reasonable to them. Just pay the money. Save the house. Save the mother. I stood up. I placed my heavy leather bag on the coffee table. I took out the forensic accounting report. I took out the police report. I took out the forged signature affidavit. "I am not here to negotiate." I said, "I am here to clarify." I looked at Aunt Sarah. "You think this is about a family dispute?" I asked. I picked up the report. This is the breakdown of the $50,000 she is asking for. $4,000 is for surgery. $46,000 is to pay off the debts she accrued by forging my signature and Grant's signature for the last 5 years. I turned to Cynthia. "You want me to pay $50,000 so you can hire a lawyer to defend yourself against me?" "That is a lie," Cynthia snapped, her weak voice vanishing instantly. "Those are family expenses." I played the recording. It was the recording from the hospital phone call Grant had told me about, but Grant hadn't just told me, he had recorded it on his end. He had sent it to me that morning. The sound of Cynthia's voice filled the room, tinny but clear. I should have forged his signature better. I should have taken everything before he grew a spine. The room went dead silent. Aunt Sarah's hand covered her mouth. The cousins looked at their shoes. Cynthia's face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. She stood up, throwing the blanket off. She did not look sick anymore. She looked cornered. "I did it for this family," she screamed. She pointed a shaking finger at Grant. He could not make enough money. The business was failing. I kept the lights on. I kept the cars in the driveway. I kept up appearances so you people would not look down on us. She turned to me, her eyes wild. "And you ungrateful little leech, I used your credit because you were not using it. You were nobody. You were working in a diner. I needed that liquidity to keep the Kensington name respectable. I looked at her calmly. Family is not a resource you mine until it is empty. Cynthia, I said, and family is not where you sign other people's names to save your own face. I gathered my papers. The police report is filed. I said to the room, the fraud investigation is active. If any of you give her money, you are funding a criminal defense, not a heart surgery. I turned to leave. Cynthia lunged, not physically, but with words. She realized the victim card had expired. She realized the negotiator card had failed. She had one card left, the one my mother had warned me about in her letter. Wait, she shrieked. I stopped at the door. You think you have won? She hissed. You think you can just walk away and watch me burn? I am not watching you burn. I said, I am watching the fire you started finally reach you. You go through with this court date, she said, her voice dropping to a low, venomous register. And I will scorch the earth. I opened the door. See you in court. Cynthia. I walked out to my car. My heart was pounding, but I felt light. I had done it. I had exposed her in front of the audience she cared about most. I had stripped away the mask. I drove home, feeling like the nightmare was finally ending. The court hearing for the separation and the civil fraud suit was set for Tuesday. It was over. But at 10 o'clock that night, as I was preparing my suit for the hearing, my phone buzzed. A text from Cynthia. I expected a curse. I expected a threat of violence. Instead, it was a single sentence that made my blood freeze in my veins. If you drag me down on Tuesday, I will release the information about what Grant really did in 1998. I will tell the court and the press where the original money for the business came from, and I will tell them about the accident. I stared at the screen. 1998. I was 6 years old. The year my mother died. The accident. My mother had died in a car accident. Grant had always said it was a patch of ice. He had said he lost control. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. This was not financial blackmail anymore. This was something else. She was threatening to rewrite the history of my mother's death. I called Grant. He didn't answer. I looked at the text again. You want the truth? She texted again. I will give everyone the truth. Withdraw the lawsuit, or your father goes to prison for vehicular manslaughter. I sat down on the edge of my bed. The countdown to court had just turned into a countdown to a detonation I hadn't seen coming. Tuesday morning arrived with a sky the color of slate, matching the mood inside the county courthouse. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Miles Hart. The wood of the table was cool under my fingertips, grounding me. On the other side of the aisle sat Cynthia, Grant, and a lawyer she had managed to retain, likely with the last dregs of credit she had scraped together. Cynthia was dressed in a muted gray suit, looking every bit the aggrieved matriarch. She had abandoned the wheelchair she used for her social media videos, opting instead for a cane she did not need. Grant sat beside her, staring at a spot on the carpet, looking like a man whose soul had vacated the building. The hearing was technically a civil proceeding regarding the fraudulent debt and the contesting of the property deed, but the air in the room felt like a criminal trial. Miles stood up. He did not use theatrics. He used paper. Your Honor, he began, his voice calm and precise. We are not here to discuss family dynamics. We are here to discuss mathematics and ink. He placed a timeline on the overhead projector. Exhibit A, Miles said. On January 1st, 15 years ago, the plaintiff, Brielle Kensington, was evicted from her home. On that exact same day, a credit card application was submitted in her name from the IP address of the Kensington residence. He flipped to the next slide. Exhibit B, a notarized deed for a home equity line of credit, dated 3 years ago. The signature reads, Brielle Kensington. However, on that specific date, travel records and employment time cards show that Miss Kensington was working a double shift at a restaurant 200 miles away. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, the defendant, Cynthia Kensington, has systematically treated her stepdaughter's identity as a renewable financial resource. She has forged signatures, falsified witness statements, and most recently, attempted to defraud a hospital by listing the plaintiff as a guarantor without consent. Cynthia's lawyer, a sweaty man named Mr. Henderson, stood up. He looked tired. "Objection, Your Honor," he said weakly. "These are domestic matters." Mrs. Kensington raised Brielle. There was an implied consent. In families, finances are often fluid. Brielle is simply angry about a personal disagreement and is weaponizing the courts to punish her mother, the judge, a woman with sharp eyes and zero patience for nonsense. Lowered her glasses. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice cutting through the room. "Identity theft is not a love language. Fraud is not a parenting style. If I sign your name to a mortgage without your knowledge, is that a fluid financial situation? Or is it a felony, Mr. Henderson sat down. Then came the moment Cynthia had been banking on, the moment she thought would save her. She requested to speak. The judge allowed it. Cynthia stood up, leaning heavily on her cane. She turned to me, tears already welling in her eyes. "I did it for us," she whispered, loud enough for the court reporter to hear. "I did it to save the family business, to keep a roof over Logan's head. And Brielle, if you continue with this, if you destroy me, you destroy your father." She turned to the gallery, where a few reporters were sitting dragged here by the viral nature of her own Facebook posts. "She knows," Cynthia said darkly. "She knows that if she pushes this, a terrible secret will come out, a secret about the accident in 1998. The room went silent. This was the threat, the vehicular manslaughter charge she had dangled over my head via text message. I looked at Grant. He was trembling. Cynthia continued, her voice gaining strength. "Your father is not the saint you think he is. In 1998, on the night your mother died, it wasn't ice. He was, 'Stop,' Grant said. It was a whisper, but it carried." Cynthia froze. She looked down at him. "Shut up. Grant," she hissed. "I am saving you." "No," Grant said. He stood up. He did not look at her. He looked at me. He walked to the witness stand and asked to be sworn in. The judge, sensing the shift in the tectonic plates of the room, allowed it. Grant sat in the chair. He took a deep breath. "For 20 years, he said, his voice shaking but clear. "My wife, Cynthia, has told me that on the night Elena died, I was at fault. She told me that I had been drinking. She told me that she spoke to the police and paid them off to hide the toxicology report. She told me that if I ever left her, or if I ever defied her, she would release that report and I would go to prison for manslaughter." He looked at Cynthia. She was pale, her mouth slightly open. "I believed her," Grant said, "because I was grieving, because I was broken. But last night, after Brielle showed me the evidence of the other forgeries, I hired a private investigator to pull the archived police report from 1998. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. There was no alcohol. Grant said, there was no bribe. The toxicology report was clean. It was just ice. It was an accident." He looked at Cynthia, and for the first time, I saw anger in his eyes. "You gaslit me for 20 years, he said. "You made me believe I was a murderer so you could control me. You held my grief hostage to make me sign loans and look the other way while you stole from my daughter." Cynthia shrieked. It was a primal, ugly sound. "You are lying," she screamed, lunging toward the stand. "You are a weak, pathetic man." The bailiff stepped forward, blocking her. Grant looked at me. "I am sorry." "Brielle," he said, "I am so sorry. I cannot undo what I let happen, but I will not let her use me to hurt you anymore. I am not saving her." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. But the damage was done. Cynthia's leverage, the dark secret she had held over the family like a guillotine, was revealed to be just another one of her fabrications. Logan, who was sitting in the front row, stood up. He looked at his mother, then at his father. He looked at the clothes he was wearing, the watch on his wrist. He walked out of the courtroom. He didn't say a word, but the slam of the heavy oak door was an indictment in itself. He knew now. His entire life of privilege had been purchased with lies. The judge called for order. When silence returned, the ruling was swift and brutal. based on the overwhelming evidence of forgery, coercion, and identity theft. The judge stated, "I am granting the plaintiff's motion. The deed to the property known as the Kensington residence is hereby declared void regarding Brielle Kensington's liability. The debt remains the sole responsibility of Grant and Cynthia Kensington. Furthermore," the judge continued, looking at Cynthia with disdain, "I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation into wire fraud, bank fraud, and extortion." Cynthia slumped in her chair. And regarding the medical situation, the judge added, "The hospital legal representative is present." A lawyer for St. Jude's stood up. "Your Honor," he said, "we have removed Miss Kensington as the guarantor. Mrs. Kensington is eligible for emergency care under the state's Indigent Care Act, provided she surrenders her financial disclosures. However, she will not be treated in a private suite, and she will not be eligible for elective procedures without prepayment." Cynthia looked up. "Indigent care," she whispered, like a homeless person, like a person with no assets and no credit." The lawyer corrected, "The hearing was adjourned. I did not celebrate. I did not smile. I simply packed my papers into my briefcase." Grant approached me in the aisle. He was holding a file. "Here," he said. "It was the original trust deed for my mother's property, and my birth certificate, and the rest of my personal documents. I am moving into an apartment near the shop," he said. "I filed the separation papers this morning. I do not expect you to forgive me. I took the documents. I forgive you. Dad," I said, "because holding on to hate is too expensive, but forgiveness does not mean access. You chose your peace over my safety for 15 years. You have to live with that." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. He turned and walked away, a man finally free, but alone. Then, I turned to Cynthia. She was sitting at the defense table, alone. Her lawyer had already left to file withdrawal papers, likely realizing he would never get paid. She looked small. The monster that had terrified me for a decade was just a bitter, bankrupt woman in a gray suit. She looked at me with pure hatred. "You ruined everything," she hissed. "Are you happy I have nothing? I need that surgery. Who is going to pay for it now?" I reached into my bag. I pulled out a white envelope. I did not put $50,000 inside. I did not put a check. I placed the envelope on the table in front of her. Inside was the map I had printed, the map to the barely audible shelter. Along with it was the list of free clinics, the number for the state Medicaid office, and the address of the local food bank. I added one new thing to the pile, a bus pass with $20 on it. This is what I had. "Cynthia," I said, "you told me it would build character. You told me it was for my own good." I leaned in close. "Now, it is your turn to grow up." I turned and walked toward the exit. I pushed open the heavy double doors of the courthouse and stepped out. The sun hit my face, bright and warm. The air smelled of rain and exhaust, but to me, it smelled like oxygen. I stood on the steps for a moment. I was 33 years old. I had debts to clear up, a credit score to rebuild, and a family tree that had been pruned down to the roots. But I was free. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a notification from the Postal Service. "Package delivered, return to sender." It was the certified letter Cynthia had sent me weeks ago, the invoice for my childhood. I had refused it. And now, the system has officially rejected her claim on me. I looked at the screen for a second. Then I swiped the notification away. I put the phone in my pocket. I did not exact revenge with money. I did not exact revenge with violence. I exacted revenge with the truth. And by sending her to the exact place she had once thrown me, I walked down the steps, my heels clicking on the pavement, walking away from the Kensingtons and into a life that was finally completely mine. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Justice is a dish best served with receipts, isn't it? I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Let me know in the comments if you are listening from work, from home, or maybe even on your way to build your own empire. Please make sure to subscribe to Veronica Revenge Stories, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need to see that the truth always wins. See you in the next video.